Revenge films.
I divorced Jane about a year ago. There were 3 reasons. First, Jane was having an affair. Second, there were too many differences in expectations before and after our marriage. And thirdly, she was using me just for my money. Jane was 34 and I was 30, and we had no children. Jane was always known for her beauty among me and my friends. I was just a plain guy, so she was always out of my league. I never thought that I had a chance with her, but to my surprise, it was Jane who approached me one day. I took advantage of that opportunity, and after aggressively pursuing her, I was able to marry her quite easily. My income was about $3,500 a month when we first got married, but Jane complained about it almost immediately after we got married.
That's not enough. We need to save money for when we have a child as well. Can you increase your hours?
I loved Jane, so I didn't think twice about it. I expected my salary to be insufficient for the two of us, so after she told me that, I started working Saturdays as well, and worked as much overtime as I could bear. One such day, I got a call from a friend. "You seem pretty intense recently, but is everything okay? I'd like to meet for a chat sometime if you can make the time for it." Well, Jane says that $3,500 isn't enough, and honestly, I was barely getting by when I was on my own. So I don't blame her for feeling that way, now that I have to support us both. That's why I'm so busy recently. I've managed to increase my salary to about $4,500 though. Huh? $3,500 isn't enough. Honestly, if it's just you two, I'd say that even $3,000 is enough to get by and save a little money while you're at it. Yeah, but Jane's thinking about our future child too. She wants to save money for that as well. I'm proud of how well planned she is. Well, you know what they say, love is blind. Yeah, whatever, man. But John ended up convincing me for over 3 hours to have his friend's father, who was a detective, do an investigation. I was shocked at what I found out. I was just an ATM machine. Jane was having an affair too. And before we got married, my in-laws had told me,
We have plenty of savings too, so don't worry about us.
but that was a lie. They were over $300,000 in debt. At this point, however, I still thought I had a chance to repair things. But new facts started surfacing and my in-laws' excuses were so bad, so I changed my mind. First off, I found out that the affair that Jane was having had started 2 years before we even started dating. And it was a junior employee at the same company that I worked at. Jane had been conspiring with him to leech my money. Next, my in-laws had assured me that they were debt-free, but actually were heavy in debt. I found out later that they too were relying on my money. Oh, and all that debt was gambling related. And I couldn't believe the words that came out of Jane when I confronted her.
Well, what matters is that you love me, Jack, right? I love multiple people. If you can't accept that, that's on you. I haven't done anything wrong.
I stood there, speechless from those words, and Jane continued firing.
And the biggest reason is because you were always at work and I was lonely. So it's all your fault to begin with. Understand? $3,500 is not enough. Work more and make more money.
The woman who said that was standing on a pedestal and scolding me. On top of that, my in-laws trespassed into my house.
You're in the wrong, Jack. You reap what you sow.
They took all my household appliances and my hobby collections that I had acquired over the years and sold them without my permission.
Having a hobby is the equivalent to not loving your wife. So this is all your fault.
That's what they continued to tell me until the very day that I got divorced. By the way, I found out that the affair had started 2 years ago on the morning of the day of my divorce. My boss had interrogated the guy and made him confess. I talked to my boss and heard the recordings later and found out the reasons too. Jack makes plenty of money, and he doesn't have many things to spend it on. So we'd be doing him a favor by spending his money for him. We'd be helping the economy too, so we'd be killing 3 birds with 1 stone. In the end, I was too tired to get heavily involved, so I hired a lawyer who settled on an agreement. The terms were that they would stay out of my life for good, and in return, I had to forfeit my rights to any compensation and had to pay $20,000 in alimony. However, if they were to break the contract in any way, I would press charges for everything they owed me. Jane had spent $85,000 of my money split into 2 different accounts without my permission. And I could also press charges for the affair, theft, humiliation, trespassing, fraud, and multiple other charges for a total of over $120,000, excluding the alimony. If any of them came near me, I would sue them for triple that amount. And if it was within 3 years of the divorce, I would also add alimony. The contract explicitly stated all of that and gave them no way out. Under these conditions, I paid Jane $20,000 and divorced her. However, it's only been about a year since our divorce. And the other day, Jane and her parents suddenly showed up at my door.
All of our money is going towards our debt. We can't survive like this. I know you love me, Jack. So I'll give you another chance if you help us pay back our debt. My parents and I are willing to forgive you for everything, Jack. Aren't you grateful? But if you refuse, that means you were playing me all along, and I'll sue you for alimony.
While I was out, they had found my apartment room and broke my window and came into the house and claimed such ridiculous remarks the moment I walked in through my front door. The moment I opened the door to my empty room, I screamed at the sight of Jane and her entire family there. After saying what they wanted, they tried to leave. So I called the police right away. They arrived in 5 minutes, and all of them were arrested. I found out later from the police that they had even stolen valuables on their way out. After that, I just wanted to get rid of them, so I activated the contract. Jane used to be pretty, but she had to work hard as a night worker to pay me for my money, and she started looking all fatigued. Her beauty was her greatest asset, but with a face like that, she couldn't keep customers, and out of desperation, she started whoring herself out and quickly fell to the bottom of society. At this pace, I'm gonna be an old man by the time she pays me back, but I don't want to push her too hard, because after all, she needs to be alive for me to get my money. When I talk to my friends about the situation, they often tell me how evil I am, but I don't get it. It's been about a year and a half since the incident, and Jane approached me just as I expected, so I was doing well. I even found a new girlfriend who I ran a background check on with permission from her parents. I was just too traumatized not to. Everything checked out, so we got happily married. Oh, by the way, I did make that junior employee pay up as well. His parents came to apologize and tell me that they would pay the money. But I wanted the kid to pay for what he did. And he didn't lose his job, so we came up with an agreement that I would receive monthly payments directly out of his monthly salaries. So now I have a worker who will take on any amount of work that I ask him to do and who can't run from the company. I take it easy on him though. I only collect 20% of his monthly pay. But at this pace, his payment will probably last until I'm an old man as well. Hopefully, he and Jane live long lives.
Hi, I'm a student. I'm a senior in high school. There's this big patch of land next to my house. My neighbor used to grow crops there, but a few months ago, he injured his hips, so he was taking a break. It was starting to get hot outside. There were lots of bugs near the farm. I started getting bugs inside my house as well, but he wanted to keep farming after he got better, so he didn't want to use any pesticides. His hips still hurt very badly, but he mowed the lawn every now and then. My brother and I offered to help whenever we had free time. He needed to rest. Before his injury, he always gave us free food. He's been really good to us, so now it was our time to help him. Oh! Plus, he had a lawnmower, so it wasn't that hard. But the place was huge! It got pretty hot during the summer, so sometimes we couldn't finish everything in one day. But then one day, it was Saturday afternoon. We waited for the sun to go down and went out to mow the lawn. We saw an ugly car parked in the middle of the land. There was nobody around it and the engine was off, so someone must have parked it here. For now, we just mowed the lawn around the car. We went to see our neighbor on our way home. Hey, is your relative here or something? I asked. No. Why? There was this car at the farm. Thought it was your grandson or something. No, it's just me. And if it was one of my relatives, they'd say something first, so. All right then. I'll tell the owner if I see him again. The next morning, we went back out to the field. The car was gone, but there was garbage all over the place. Empty beer cans, leftovers, and even a used condom. I asked my brother to get a garbage bag. We started cleaning up. Turns out the place was filled with garbage. We didn't notice because of the grass. I guess it wasn't the first time this guy parked here and made a mess. I was starting to get angry. He wants to farm again once his hip is feeling better. Parking your car is one thing, but littering? Unbelievable! We used 2 10-gallon garbage bags to clean up the field. We decided to take turns washing the field. One evening, I heard a car engine from outside. My brother and I ran over to the field. There it was. That same ugly car we saw before. It was a young guy and a girl. They looked troubled. We hid behind the tree and watched.
Free parking! Awesome! No need to pay for taxis or hotel. Yay!
Yeah.
Plus, someone always cleans up after us.
Yeah.
Let's party!
Yeah! The two held hands and left the field. While they were out partying, I slid a no parking sign on their front window. The next morning, the car was gone. We found more garbage, more used condoms, and a ripped up warning sign. They kept coming back after that, usually on the weekends. They parked there without permission and made a big mess every single time. We decided to tell them directly to stop. My brother and I waited for them to show up. Then we heard the engine. We rushed over and started talking to them.
What, you got a problem?
Said the girl. You're damn right I do! This place belongs to our neighbor. He's been farming here for ages. This isn't a place for you to park and make a mess! The girl replied,
Wait, so it's not your land, is it? Then why are we talking to you? Call that neighbor of yours if you want to complain. In fact, we want to get some things off our chest too.
We manage this property right now, so you can tell me. I said back to her.
Alright then, do something about the grass, will you? It's damaging my boyfriend's car.
Yeah! So on Saturday, we did. We woke up early and mowed the entire field clean. Now what did we do with all the cut grass? If we just leave it here, it'll blow all over the place. You're right. Why don't we dig a big hole and put it in there? I was thinking the same thing. And so, we dug some holes around the area where the idiot parked all the time and filled the holes with the cut grass. We also threw in some rocks to hold down the grass. That night, those idiots showed up again. As soon as we heard the engine, we rushed over and watched from a distance. They seemed happy that the field was nice and clean now. They slowly parked their car, then I heard a big thud. They drove into one of the holes. Looks like one of the wheels fell in. He tried to floor it, but all the rocks and grass got caught in the wheel and damaged his ugly-ass car, making it even uglier. Then the neighbors showed up complaining about all the noise. They all yelled at him. You know what time it is? You're stuck? I don't care! Get the hell out of here!
It's your own fault. You don't even have permission to park here.
They looked bummed out, but they couldn't get the car out on their own, so they asked them for help. Needless to say, nobody helped them. They all went home. Finally, the girl called AAA and somehow managed to pull the car out of there. Apparently, the tow cost them $200. It was late, so it was more expensive than usual.
What?
They seemed shocked, but it's not like they had a choice. We watched the entire thing unfold from a distance. $200? They could have stayed in a luxurious hotel. $200 for parking? They got ripped off. We had a good laugh at their expense. At the end, the two started fighting about what happened. They both blamed each other. But it's not like we dug that hole on purpose. It was nighttime, so I guess they just didn't notice. That all happened about a month ago. We haven't seen them since.
Back when I was 25 years old, I was working at a gaming company as a programmer. I was making about $60,000 a year, which wasn't bad for my age. But I wasn't a very good-looking guy, and I had never had a girlfriend in my life. One day, however, I met the love of my life, Erica. I met Erica one day when I was visiting home. She was very beautiful from back then and is still gorgeous. I could tell that she was a popular girl, but I tried my luck and asked her out. And to my surprise, she said okay. I was surprised to hear that Erica had never had a boyfriend either. It was unbelievable at first because how could such a good-looking girl not have ever had a boyfriend, right? But I didn't think much of it. I was just excited that my first girlfriend ever was such a beautiful woman. When I visited her house, she introduced me to her mother and younger sister. Her mother, Karen, was a languorous and soft-spoken, classy woman, and her younger sister, Jane, was a mature and pretty girl. I started visiting them every time I came back into town. I started thinking about marriage about 2 years into our relationship, but for some reason, whenever I would mention it, Erica seemed unsure. She never really gave me a good reason why, though. Well, I guess it's because I'm not that good looking. Maybe I'm just not good enough for her. Maybe she's just too nice to cut it off with me. So, one day, I broke up with her. Sorry for being so pushy. But she didn't want to break up and told me that she wanted to get married too, but she had one condition.
If we're getting married, I want to run away and take Jane with us.
What do you mean? Erica started confessing her feelings. She told me that Karen had been forcing Jane and her to prostitute themselves. Erica's father had evaporated with his girlfriend after having an affair, and ever since then, Karen had become an abusive alcoholic. They couldn't survive because Karen was jobless and unwilling to work. So Karen had been forcing Erica and Jane to sell themselves after graduating middle school, and they'd been serving customers ever since. One of the customers was even their uncle, who was a former gang member. Because of that, Erica and Jane were labeled as sluts in their hometown, and everyone pointed fingers at them. I had no idea about any of this. They'd tried to run away together when they were teenagers, but their uncle found them and brought them back every time. I was surprised to hear that Erica even had experience with abortions. Looking back, there were times that I visited and both the sisters were out. I usually just had drinks with Karen on those days. I guess Karen's languorous demeanor was just her being grumpy because she was sober. I could recall times that people would laugh at us and look at us pitifully when we were out eating. I always thought that it was because an ugly guy like me was with a beautiful girl like Erica. And I never slept with Erica, but it never bothered me much. And she would never agree to meet my parents either.
When we decide to get married.
She would always say, and avoid the meeting. She came clean that, at first, she only agreed to date me to use me for my money, and that she was after my parents' money as well. And it was all orchestrated by Karen. After finding out that my older brother would be inheriting everything, she tried to send Jane to seduce my brother. However, as time went by, Erica really did fall in love with me, and she didn't want to get married under false pretenses. She confessed to everything, even if it meant that I would hate her for it.
So, now you know. Do you still want to get married to me after hearing all of that?
I didn't need any time to think about it. Of course I do. It's one thing if you were doing it for a little extra cash, but you were forced, right? It wasn't even your decision. I mean, I'm not proud of it, but there was a time in my life that I used to go to brothels myself. If you like me now, that's all that matters. I don't care about your past. Now that I mention it out loud, I'm kind of a piece of shit myself. Erica laughed a little. It really didn't matter to me what her initial intentions were. What mattered most was that I loved her now. Hearing her past didn't change my feelings for her at all. But this was just the beginning of our hardships. My parents, brother, relatives, and even all my friends were against the marriage. Well, it was expected, so I wasn't that shocked to hear that. After I convinced them for a while, my parents and brother were still against it, but they agreed to cooperate with us. However, you should be prepared to never be able to come back to this town, son. That's all my father told me in the end, as he helped prepare for me, Erica, and Jane to leave. First, me and Erica got in a huge fight in front of Karen at her house and broke up in front of her. Even though it was just acting, it hurt me to yell at Erica about her prostitution. Karen panicked and tried to fix things, and although I just felt like punching her in the face, I held it in and left. Meanwhile, Erica and Jane separated their names from their family registry and notified the city hall that they were moving out. I rented an apartment in a different city and opened a new bank account from which my rent and all their expenses and taxes would be deducted automatically from. Erica and Jane officially changed their new address to that location, and I asked a couple that were my brother's friends to live there for a while and transfer us important paperwork that was sent to us. So, on paper, we all lived there for the meantime, and we gathered our things and moved out to a different apartment, away from Karen. My father visited Karen after we had moved out. My son left a note and disappeared. It said that your daughter fooled him. If he is found dead somewhere, it's all her fault. He yelled at her to make it clear that our family, including myself, had nothing to do with her daughter's disappearance. I heard later from my mother that it became a pretty big deal, and even the cops were called. Now, all we had to do was wait for Karen and her brother to die, and we could happily get married. We also decided to wait on a child as well until they were gone, in fear that they might track us down by following the paperwork. I don't know how they found out, but one time Karen and her brother even came to my office. I was furious inside, but I held it in and acted crazy instead. You saw the fight, Karen! What the hell do you want after all this time? Jeez! I spent so much time getting treated by a psychiatrist, and I'm finally over it. I don't care what happens to those sluts! Stay the hell out of my life! I sent them home and consulted my boss, who agreed to transfer me to a smaller branch in a different city, where the three of us moved. Life wasn't easy though. I don't mean financially, but just everyday life. We had to avoid going out as much as possible during the day and go shopping late at night and things like that. But regardless, Erica and Jane seemed happy.
This is heaven compared to our old life.
4 years passed, and we finally got word that Karen and Erica's uncle had died. Apparently, they crashed while driving under the influence and their car exploded. According to the neighbors, after Erica and her sister left, the two became severely addicted to alcohol and were taking part in incest. We were told that people could hear them fooling around inside while the sun was still up. Their relatives completely gave up on them and cut ties. With no one to lean on, they were out of hope. It's rumored that the accident wasn't actually an accident. My brother told me these things, but honestly, it didn't matter either way. I was just glad that they left this earth earlier than expected. Immediately, we went over to the house that I was borrowing from my brother's friends. According to the husband, the uncle stopped by once, but he called the cops and he left. I offered to pay them for their troubles, but he told me that they were going to buy a new house with the money that they were able to save during the time that they were using the room, and that it wasn't necessary. So I asked him to just let me pay for the move. After they left, we moved out of the apartment that we were living in and into that room. Then, we got married, and finally, Erica and I were a married couple. After that, Jane went back to school and got a job. Last year, she engaged to her boyfriend that she had been dating for 2 years. One day, the 5 of us, Jane and her boyfriend, myself, Erica, and our child, went out to dinner together, and Jane introduced her boyfriend to us.
This is Kyle. He's very reliable, just like you, Jack.
Those words made me cry. Jane and her boyfriend seemed confused because it wasn't something to cry about. Erica held our 2-year-old daughter in her arms and said,
Aw, how cute. Daddy feels like he's Jane's daddy, too.
Let me tell you about this idiot at my workplace. His name is Ken. He entered this company around the same time as me. Unlike me, he was a handsome guy who seemed like a fine young man. About 6 months after I started working, he got transferred to my division, where I found out about his rotten nature. If he ever got scolded, even for something small, the next day he would call in sick. His workload would automatically be forced onto me, which happened very often, but not once has he said thank you or sorry to me. Our division was rearranged, and I was put in charge of a fairly demanding position. And while I was still trying to get used to it, he would insult me. Why aren't you finished yet? I'd be done by now, stop pretending like you're tired. And Ken would talk behind my back to the senior employees. Jake is so worthless. He really can't do anything without me. He would spread baseless rumors like that about me. Thanks to him, I was labeled as the worthless guy, and my evaluations were always low. And my senior employees would pick on me. This company hired you thanks to me, alright? He started trying to guilt trip me into buying him booze and cigarettes. When we got a bonus, he tried forcing me to go gambling with him. I hated gambling, so I strongly refused. And he must have been offended because he wouldn't leave me alone after that. Who do you think looks after you every day? He never remembered a single time that I covered for him. He was always so insistent about me going gambling with him. And I always wondered what was in it for him. But I found out later that he was planning on taking all my winnings if I won any money. That was such a lose-lose situation for me, obviously. And after I kept refusing, he finally gave up on trying to invite me. There were a few times that we worked on projects together. Leave this up to me. He would act like he was going to do all the work, but when it came down to it, he made me do most of the work. He barely did anything, but he would order me around like he was my boss or something. Of course, there was no way that I could pull all the weight myself, and I ended up making mistakes and getting scolded and made to write performance reports afterwards. And I wasn't his only victim. One day, a new guy entered our company. Ken made the new guy who barely finished training do ridiculously impossible work and just slacked off. The new guy had no idea what he was doing, but Ken just pretended like he didn't even notice. How do I do this? When the boy asked him questions about things that he obviously couldn't have known, "What the hell? You can't even figure this out? Go back and redo college, you dumbass." Ken just insulted him and yelled at him. And once he was done with the easy parts of the job, "I'm all done with my part," haha, he would leave the new guy crying in his corner and go home. This kind of happened all the time. I tried to follow up on the kid, but he ended up getting physically and mentally sick and had to take time off work. After hearing about the boy, man, there really are some pretty useless guys out there. All that effort teaching him went to waste. Ken purposefully spoke loudly so everyone would hear him. He was supposed to oversee the boy, but he was so good at kissing ass, so he never got in trouble. That was pretty much his only strong point. He kissed up to his seniors, so not everyone noticed, but there were many junior employees that were broken by Ken. He always had excuses and spoke a big game, so his wrongdoings never surfaced. But I never forgave him for what he did to that new kid, so I decided to get revenge. I was never the aggressive type, so I had to think long and hard about how I could get him back, and the opportunity came faster than I expected. One day, I was paired up with him again, and the project was super hard. "Leave this up to me, sir." As usual, he spoke a big game to our boss and forced me to do all the heavy lifting. And he even went on vacation overseas. But I wanted to take advantage of this opportunity while he was gone, so I did the bare minimum and passed the rest on to him when he got back. Ken seemed relaxed about it because he expected me to finish all the work, and he probably just planned to blame it on me if it wasn't finished. It's not done yet. "What were you doing while I was gone, you useless piece of trash? Hurry up and finish it!" Just as expected, he tried to force me to do all the work, but this time, I didn't comply. Well, a useless piece of trash like me was able to get this far, so I'm sure that a brilliant prodigy like yourself will have no problem finishing it off, right? I gave him a big smile and refused to do the rest. But the truth is, Ken had a good impression with our bosses, but he was very incapable. He was just hiding it well with his talk and attitude, but he was also a prideful man. And I knew that if I fed his fire, he would bite. So I used that against him. Huh? Of course, asshole, this is easy. He took the bait just as expected. So I left him with the rest of the work and just observed. He had his pride on the line and was trying really hard to finish it on time, but he was making so many mistakes and wasn't getting anywhere. He was getting agitated and came to me. Hey, you do some of this too. Really? You can't handle this? It should be no problem for you. Good luck. I didn't take no for an answer and just left him with it all. Watching him from a distance made it even more apparent how incapable he was. He would pace back and forth, not knowing what to do, so I decided to keep pressing. I went to another senior employee. Ken says that he's got this, so if you have anything else you want me to do, I'll work on that. Oh, really? Can I ask you to help out with this then? I'm kind of behind on this. That would help so much. He seemed really happy that I was willing to help out. I could feel Ken's glare like he was saying, "Why are you helping him and not me?" He seemed very annoyed, but I didn't care. Now that I was helping a senior employee out, there was no way that he could try to switch workloads with me. The more annoyed he got, the less efficient he became. And I had a good excuse now when he came to ask for help. Sorry, man, I've got to do this. So, good luck. You got that. He couldn't argue that. And I kept repeating this for the next few weeks. He changed over this period of time from a fine young man to a spoiled dumbass. He seemed fatigued and he was complaining to everyone. I'm working so hard, but no one is helping me out. He just started taking it out on the people around him. And finally, he said that there was trouble at home and stopped coming to work completely. I didn't have anything to do with it from there on, but he kept tumbling down further and further. 1 month later, he started coming back, but the boss decided that he couldn't risk another incident like that and was sent off to a less busy branch in the countryside. He ended up quitting, saying that this wasn't what he signed up for, and his wife got fed up with him and left him, and he got kicked out of the house. He lived in his car for a while, but he ran out of money and begged our president to take him back. And although he was rehired in a different division of the company, he continually made mistakes and ended up backfiring at the boss who looked after him and quitting again. He had a friend hire him as a contract worker for a couple of months, but ended up using most of his money on gambling and was living day to day now. He even tried calling me up for help. Hey, can you lend me some money? Oh, and I'm having a hard time getting by right now, so will you let me live with you? I gladly rejected him. Finally, the other day, after borrowing money from his company, his bosses, and senior and junior employees, he disappeared into thin air. My boss was furious. If I find him, I'm gonna beat him to a pulp, and then some. He was good with his words, so he managed to make many people lend him money. My part of the revenge may have been insignificant, but watching him ruin his own life was kind of satisfying. On a side note, the new kid came back after Ken was gone to fill his spot. Most of his depression was caused by Ken, so after he was out of the picture, I'd been calling the kid up and telling him that he could take his time and come back when he wanted to. That kid works under me now. And the other day, I saw on the news that Ken had been arrested in a different state. I guess he was using his mouth to scam people. The last picture I saw of him, he was covering his face in a hoodie in the back of a police car.
My 2 children have gotten married and left the house, so I looked back on my life. I'm happy now, but it still gives me the shivers looking back on those days. It was a living hell. I got divorced to my husband Joe right after my second daughter was born. Joe was having an affair with a girl he met while I was pregnant with their first daughter. We tried making things work after she was born, but he was having an affair again with another girl when I was pregnant with their second child. His only reason was that he was horny. I knew that I couldn't do this anymore, so I asked him for a divorce.
I'm not signing those papers. Ever!
But you're going to cheat on me again, aren't you?
Yeah, probably.
He didn't even seem sorry. His attitude made me angry. Okay then, divorce it is. When I told him my decision, he went to his workshop and brought a big cutter knife and glared at me. What are you doing?
I said I'm not signing those papers!
Alright, calm down. Let's talk about this like grown adults.
How dare you tell me to calm down? You're trying to decide on our divorce, and you expect me to be calm? Who the hell do you think you are?
My baby, who I was still breastfeeding back then, was sleeping close by, and he was startled by my husband's yelling and started crying.
Hey, make him shut up!
He yelled at me. When I saw his face, his eyes were tripping. I could sense something was wrong, so I picked up my baby and tried to calm him down right away, but he wouldn't stop crying. Joe just snapped.
Ah! Shut up, shut up, shut up! I'm sick of you all!
His hand with the knife in it was shaking. It felt like it was just a matter of time before he attacked us. Please, calm down, okay?
This is all your fault! Go to hell!
He started yelling and running towards me with a maleficent look in his eye. I quickly covered my baby and turned my back towards him. Joe was yelling at the top of his lungs and slashed me 2 times on my back. It felt like a bolt of lightning passed through my body. I screamed in pain. Joe threw the knife in front of me.
Fine, you can have your divorce, but I'm not paying you alimony. This is your fault.
After saying that, he left the house like he was running away from something. My body was shaking with fear and pain. After I made sure he was gone, I called for an ambulance. Then, I called my parents and explained to them what had happened and asked them to come pick up my older kid. The ambulance arrived and I was carried to the hospital. That look on Joe's face was insane. Joe is out of his mind right now, so make sure you lock up well. I warned my parents about Joe. The cuts on my back weren't deep, but I made sure to get a doctor's note and officially filed for divorce a few days later. I said that I didn't need alimony or compensation for the treatment, but requested the full payment for child support in one payment, full custody of the kids, and to stay out of lives forever. If he agreed to these terms, I promised not to get the police involved, but if he didn't, I warned him that I would take my doctor's note and go straight to the police. Joe had no choice but to accept. He borrowed the money for child support from his own mother. I could care less about where the money came from. But Joe's mother was dissatisfied about the divorce, and I received a call from her after I got divorced. Don't get the wrong impression now. The divorce was all your fault. Even Joe thinks so. He cut me with a knife. Why am I being yelled at? I mean, the divorce only came up as a topic in the first place because Joe cheated on me twice and wasn't even sorry about it and said that he'd probably cheat again. Exactly my point. What does that even mean? It's your fault as his wife that he would want to cheat on you in the first place. If you had been a good wife, he wouldn't have ever wanted to cheat on you. I was pregnant and he wanted someone to sleep with. What the hell am I supposed to do? Well, you should have slept with him. That's your duty as his wife, right? Joe told me how you were too busy with your child and never took care of him in bed. What was the point in getting married to you then? You worked all day and came home tired, and you wouldn't even care for him. I feel so bad for him. Oh, whatever. Why don't you sleep with him then? It sounds to me like he doesn't care who it is. Now he's all yours. Why don't you take care of him in bed then? She continued screaming over the phone. Anyways, the deal was that he stays out of my life forever, so make sure he keeps that promise. If he breaks his end of the deal, I will take him to court. I hung up on her after saying that. I made sure to charge his girlfriend for damages too after that.
It was Joe who approached me, so it's all his fault. I have no responsibility for what happened.
She tried to fight it at first, but fine, if that's how you want to do this, I'll have to contact your family and workplace. After she heard that, she paid up pretty fast and left Joe immediately. Life was going just fine for me after that. My younger sister had a license as a daycare teacher, and she helped me out a lot. Thankfully, I also had many friends who were willing to help me out. I started off living in a 1-bedroom apartment, but I got hired full-time and made enough money to give my children each their own rooms. If all goes well, my older boy will be entering college next year. We may not be able to afford to buy a house, but I had enough money saved up to help my kids out after they got married for a little bit. Things were smooth sailing. However, one day, I don't know how he found me, but Joe sent me a letter. I opened it up, and it went on about his life went downhill after he divorced me, and on about how much he blamed me for everything. It said how much he hated me, and it said multiple times that he should have killed me when he had the chance. It was so scary, and I got the shivers. It wasn't the last either. I continued to receive such letters from Joe. Every letter was pretty much the same thing, and I was thinking about going to the police soon. But after a final letter that said, I should have killed you and killed myself. The letter stopped, so I didn't act on it. A few months after that final letter, I received a notice that Joe had passed away. It was Joe's older sister that contacted me. She wasn't completely on my side when I got the divorce, but she did have enough common sense to be able to tell who was in the wrong. When she was cleaning Joe's things after he died, she found a memo with my name and address on it, and after giving it some thought, decided to let me know so I could tell my children that their father had passed away. The letter didn't say anything about the cause of death, but from what I heard that it had something to do with his romantic relationships going south. I was glad that she wrote to me, because there was always a lingering fear since he started writing me those scary letters. I told my children later as well. Maybe they were being thoughtful of me, but they both acted he finally got what he deserved. Both of my children are married now, and recently my older boy is inviting me to come live with him and his wife. I appreciate his offer, but I have friends that I enjoy my hobbies with now, and I'm enjoying living alone, so I'm refusing for now. The scars on my back are still there, and there was a scary time in my life, but life is good now. I don't think life would be so stress-free if Joe was still alive. It's been a few years since I got divorced. Looking back, it was kind of immature of me, but at the time I couldn't think of any other way to get my revenge. When I was 36 years old, I got married to Ken, who was 3 years younger than me. I wasn't that young anymore, and part of me kind of rushed the marriage, I would say. It was after I'd been cheated on by my boyfriend that I'd been dating for many years. I had several failed attempts after being dumped and attended a matchmaking party as a last resort. To my surprise, Ken approached me there, and we hit it off. I had pretty much decided that my next relationship would be my last, so it didn't take long for me to be ready to get married. Ken was a fine young man, and he was very handsome. He was a football player until his late 20s, and he had big muscles and was so attractive to me. Ken was the oldest sibling in his family, so his parents had been telling him to get married too, so things went quite smoothly, and we were getting married in no time. We held a nice wedding ceremony in a big hotel venue. Ken was always so nice. Even when I got pregnant, he would always think of me and help out around the house without having to ask. And he took the day off on my delivery day to be by my side and rub my back. When our baby was born, he was crying tears of joy.
Thank you for having him.
He thanked me for delivering our baby. I thought that I had finally had the kind of happy life that I could brag to everyone about, but my happiness was short-lasted. One evening when our boy was 14 months old, I could tell that something was wrong. He was coughing painfully. I thought that it might be a cold at first, and when I took his temperature, he didn't have a fever, so I decided to keep an eye on him for a while. But quickly, he started wheezing when he breathed, and his lips turned blue and passed out. Typical symptoms of cyanosis. I immediately called an ambulance, and when I went to the hospital, the pediatrician diagnosed him as a heavy case of asthma. That night, when Ken found out about the asthma, he changed completely.
I can't believe you gave birth to such a weak child. I knew I should have never had a child with an old hag like you. What a big mistake to marry a grandma with a rotting womb.
Ken started coming home late after that. He started getting all into nightclubs that hired immigrant women for cheap labor, strip clubs, brothels, and anything else of the sort. He started sleeping with random girls and hookers instead of me, because apparently, he wasn't sexually attracted to old hags. On the other hand, I was left all alone to deal with my son's problems, and my mind was constantly on overdrive. Ken didn't change though. He would come home late at night, drunk, and try to get me in bed. I thought you weren't sexually attracted to old hags. I would be exhausted and say no, but...
How dare you say no, bitch? You would have never gotten married if it weren't for me, you expired piece of shit. Where's my gratitude?
He would say things like that and force my clothes off. I was almost scared for my life, so I put my mind in a happy place and just let him use my body. The entire thing was so loveless, and it would be over when he was done. By the time our boy was 2, Ken barely ever came home before midnight, and there were many days that he didn't return till morning. He basically just came home to take a shower and get dressed for work. I had already felt his proclivity towards violence, and I could tell that it was escalating by the day. One night, he came home past midnight as usual, and suddenly woke me up. When I turned on the lights, he was standing there furious.
Why weren't my slippers lined up?
That was the reason, I guess, and he brought the slippers all the way into the bedroom just so he could throw them at me. Ow!
Shut up! You think that hurts? I'll show you pain!
He beat me until I had bruises on my face after that. One morning, I made him a cup of coffee, but he must have been in a hurry because when he took a big sip, he burned his tongue a little.
You did that on purpose, didn't you?
He was pissed. No, I'm sorry though.
You liar! Let me show you how hot that was.
He yelled at me and threw the coffee at me and burned me. Through all of his abuse, I had to think about my son first because he had asthma, and I couldn't get a job because I had to look after him. So I was dependent on the limited money that Ken was handing me to survive. So I took all the abuse. One such day, Ken handed me money for living expenses, but he only gave me $100. Why only this much?
What do you mean, only? Huh? All you do is sit at home and do nothing, so this is all you need.
Breastfeed our boy or something.
He laughed maliciously as he left for work. I reached my breaking point. I signed the divorce papers and left them on the table, gathered my things, and contacted my parents. I've decided to get a divorce. My parents yelled at me and demanded an explanation. I'll explain in detail when I get home. I hung up and went over to my husband's room. It was always off limits to me, but I went in and did some digging. It was a completely different world in there. There were piles of designer brand items and R-rated adult items. Thinking back, I should have just taken it all to a pawn shop and taken the money as alimony, but I wasn't thinking clearly back then, and all I could do was take out my anger and resentment on his beloved things. I decided to get him back indirectly, where he wouldn't know at first, but would feel the revenge over time. I took his expensive sweaters out of his drawers and stretched out the necks and sleeves. Then, I cut off the embroideries and cut the stitching on the back and glued it back on with water-soluble glue to barely maintain the logos, so they would all fall apart when I tried to wash them. I also cut the stitching of the handles of expensive bags in a couple of places. Just enough so that when he tried carrying something a little bit heavy in them, they would rip off. I kept doing other things like drawing lines with Sharpies on his favorite striped shirt and making small cuts in his armpits so he could see a hole when you raised your arms. I took his scarves and cut off some of the frills and cut holes in them and restitched his coat buttons with a single string so they would tear off easily. I snapped every other rib on the frame of his umbrella too. Everything I broke were expensive designer brand items. After that, I took all his porn DVDs and switched the insides to Disney movies and replaced the inside of his lotion with dish soap and put it back. Once I was finished getting my revenge, I took my son and went over to my parents' house to explain everything that I had gone through and showed them my doctor's note as proof. Everything was there on was noble procedure. I received all my alimony and child support fees in one payment from Ken. As my son grew older, his asthma stabilized, and by the time he was in elementary, he was well enough for me to get a part-time job for a few hours during the day. My older brother and his family were living with my parents at the time, so I couldn't stay there forever even though they said I could. So I decided to find a place to live with my son. My marriage with Ken was a big mistake, but I'm still grateful that I was able to have my beloved son. By the way, after we got divorced, I got a restraining order on Ken, so I'm not sure how much of the revenge he noticed. I should have been smarter about it and gone further, but I didn't want him to notice right away, and it was the best I could think of at the moment. It was the best that a gentle woman like me could do at the time.
My husband Ken's parents' house burned down 2 years ago in a fire. So I let his mother, Jane, live with us until she found a new place to live. The apartment was a room that I had bought when I was still single, and it was supposed to be a limited time thing. However, listen, Emma, I feel depressed recently. Huh? Really? Yeah. I've been seeing nightmares about that house fire every night. The fire spreads and I had nowhere to run. And I'm trembling just remembering the nightmare. Every time I wake up after seeing that dream, my body feels heavy and I feel sick to my stomach.
Why don't you go see a psychiatrist?
I think that's going too far, but I just feel anxious when I'm alone. I see. One time, Jane had her arm wrapped in bandages.
What happened to your arm, Jane?
I got hurt. I went to the hospital, and they told me that it'll take 2 months for me to get all better.
Oh my! 2 months? Did you break your arm?
It wasn't a fracture, but it hurts so bad. I can't hold silverware, and it hurts when I even try to hold a pen. I don't think I'll be able to live on my own for a while. So, would you mind if I stayed with you for a little longer?
Okay.
So, first it was Jane's depression, then it was her mysterious injury. Jane's stay just kept getting pushed back like that. She did drink my soft drinks without asking, and gave away my yoga items to her friends. But she didn't cause me too much trouble. Her husband had already passed away, and her sister-in-law died in an accident too, so I figured she was lonely. So I didn't try too hard to get rid of her. Ken and I must have spoiled her too much because she gradually escalated. And finally, yesterday, she went too far. Both Ken and I were working late last night. Around 9 p.m., I got a call from Ken who got home first.
Sorry, Emma. I got us a room at the Revenge Hotel, so head there after work. Let's spend a night there. I'm so sorry.
Why? What happened, Ken?
Well, I got home, and my key wouldn't even fit through the keyhole. When I tried ringing the doorbell, my mom wouldn't even answer the door, and she wouldn't pick up her phone. I don't want to cause a big scene so late at night. So let's just spend the night at a hotel tonight and deal with this tomorrow during the day.
I got off of work and met Ken at the hotel. There was a lot to discuss, but we were both exhausted from long days at work and just passed out. Jane was always up by 5 in the morning, so we went back home at 5 in the morning today. When we arrived, Jane was coming out to take out the trash. Oh! When she saw us, Jane tried to shut the door on us. But Ken blocked her. We caught her and made her talk. I've decided to live here alone. Ken and I were very confused.
What are you talking about, Mom?
Just leave me alone. I'll send you your things later, so go find somewhere else to live. Ken exploded on Jane.
First of all, this apartment is owned by Emma, and she's letting me live with her. The only reason why you're here in the first place was Emma's good grace. What the hell are you saying?
Jane was frightened by Ken's demeanor for a moment, and Ken took advantage of that and pushed past her to get into the house, but Jane stopped him. The bride gives up all of her belongings to the groom's family when she gets married! So this house doesn't belong to either of you. It belongs to me! Stay out of my house! Both of you! We both pushed past her anyways and went inside.
What the hell?
Huh? Is this what I think it is? The sofa in the living room was singed and melted, and the walls of the rooms were charred, and the place was filled with bottles of air freshener.
You did it again, didn't you?
Jane nodded silently and looked down to avoid eye contact with us. Huh? Was it a fire? Ken acted quickly after that. He called Jane's sister and explained the situation. She arrived with her husband in 30 minutes and drove her away. I'm sorry! It'll never happen again, so forgive me! Please? Ken just gave his mother a cold stare.
You're never coming anywhere near my house ever again.
Jane's sister apologized too. I'm so sorry, Ken, Emma. I promised to make Jane pay for everything. After apologizing many times, they put Jane in the car and drove off. What happened? Ken got on his knees.
I'm so sorry about everything. My mom must have fallen asleep with a cigarette in her hand and started a fire.
What? Apparently, the fire at Jane's house was caused by Jane falling asleep with a lit cigarette in her hand. The fire spread to the blankets and quickly got out of hand. And at my house, she didn't exactly fall asleep with a lit cigarette, but she was dozing off and threw a lit cigarette into the trash bin near the sofa and had fallen asleep. The cigarette wasn't out completely and lit the tissue and other papers in the trash bin first. The room filled with smoke and the fire alarm went off. She woke up to the sound, but by that time, the fire had already spread to the sofa. Jane went and got a bucket and filled it with water to put the fire out, and somehow managed to avoid the entire house from burning down.
When she came to live with us, she told me that she was afraid of cigarettes since the incident and that she had quit. And since everything at our house runs on electricity, I figured I wouldn't have to worry about it. But I was wrong.
The next day, Jane's brother and sister came with her to apologize. Jane came with a sulky attitude because it was decided that she would be taken in by her older brother, who promised to kick her out and cut ties with her if he ever found out that she was smoking again. Jane's sister said the same thing.
And if they ever kick you out, we don't plan to let you back in. We'll cut ties with you also.
After receiving a final warning from everyone, Jane finally seemed sorry. "I'm sorry, everyone." And she started telling us the truth. After Jane put out the fire, she knew that she couldn't let Ken find out, so she tried to hide the evidence. After wiping the water off of the floor and the tar off of the walls, she took the burnt trash bin and pillows and put them into a trash bag. The room was filled with a burnt smell, so she bought a bunch of air fresheners and placed them everywhere in the house. But finally, when it came to hiding the sofa, she gave up trying to hide the evidence and changed the locks and decided to just take over the house. The next day, she started feeling sick from all the air freshener and figured that we wouldn't come so early. So she unlocked the door and was airing the place out. Then, when she was going to throw away the air fresheners with the trash that she gathered from the day before, that's when we came home and caught her red-handed, and her plan to take over the house failed. What kind of mother tries to kick her own son out of his own house to hide her wrongdoings? Ken ended up charging her for all the damages and our hotel fees, along with all of the expenses that we covered for her while she stayed with us. Jane kept apologizing, but Ken ended up giving her a final warning, and we all called it a day. By the way, that mysterious injury that Jane had with all of the bandages was a burn that she got when she fell asleep smoking as well. It wasn't the first time that she fell asleep with a lit cigarette at our house. Things could have gone terribly wrong. Just the thought scared me.
I live with my husband at his parents' house. Everyone's really nice to me. I hear lots of stories about the struggles of living with your in-laws, but not me. I guess I was one of the lucky ones. But then, one day during dinner, my husband said,
"I wish I was a housewife. I bet it's super easy."
It came out of nowhere. Looks like someone from work told him something.
All you gotta do is cook, clean, and look after the kids. Anyone can do that.
And his dad seemed to agree with him. They went on and on like this. They complained about how hard work was and how tough it was being a guy. My husband, his parents, his brother and sister, and our 3 daughters lived in the same house. We were a family of 9. It was a pretty big family. My father-in-law still worked full-time. My mother-in-law gave piano lessons at the house. I was a housewife for the most part. When my mother-in-law didn't have lessons, I asked her to watch the kids so I could go and help out my parents with their business. They lived 10 minutes away. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law were about to lose it, so I ran over and told them to settle down. Alright then, if it's so easy, try it. Usually I wake up at 5 a.m. and cook breakfast and lunch for 9 people. Then I do the laundry, clean the entire house, take the twins to school, go grocery shopping with their 2-year-old and your mother, pick up the twins from school, come home and cook dinner. Easy, right? My husband stayed silent for a while, but he replied,
Easy. But I got work, so no can do.
To which I replied, what about the long vacation next month? He went quiet again. My husband got a 10-day vacation a few times a year, but this year it was more like 15 days due to other national holidays. He started panicking.
Well, it's my vacation, so I want to take it slow, you know?
But then his younger sister said,
You said it was easy. Do it then.
she had my back. And then my mother-in-law said to her husband, You too, dear. If it's so easy, help him. They couldn't say anything back to us. Finally, they gave up and said,
Okay.
After dinner, I explained the grocery budget to them. The next day I took them around the house and showed them what they had to do. I also told them that I'd be going back to my parents' place to help out with their business during this period. Any questions?
No.
They seemed really upset. They probably thought I'd stick around and help them out from time to time. Day 1. I woke up at 6 a.m. and went into the kitchen. My husband was cooking breakfast. He wasn't bad at cooking. He looked at me and said,
Looks good, right?
He even made lunch for everyone. He said this way we could save more money. He even packed lunch for his brother who was still in college.
Food from convenience stores are bad for you. He's family. You should pack lunch for him every day. You're just too lazy.
But his girlfriend brings him lunch every day, so I don't think he goes to convenience stores to buy lunch. Plus, there's a school cafeteria too, so I guess he didn't know that. I told you the other day. Plus, your mother doesn't need lunch today. She told you yesterday. You forgot already?
Really?
Yes. Also, bacon and egg is fine for breakfast, but for lunch too? I don't know. Usually I don't use leftovers from breakfast for lunch. I don't mind, but I'm not sure about how everyone else is gonna feel. Your dad has high blood pressure, so maybe you should reconsider. I was really enjoying this. Then I noticed there was a lunchbox that looked different from the other ones. When I asked him about it, he said,
Katie is allergic to eggs, right?
Huh? I didn't know what to say anymore. She used to be allergic to eggs for a little while, but not anymore. I told you, didn't I? She's your daughter. How could you forget that? He was speechless. Then the kids started waking up. He started feeding them breakfast, but the twins and Katie were out of control. He came crying to me for help. Getting 5-year-olds and 2-year-olds to eat is pretty tough, but I guess he didn't know that. I'm not surprised though. He never helped me with any of it, so I decided to ignore him and let him suffer. After all, it was his job to feed them today, not mine. He was exhausted by the time breakfast was over, but he still had to take the twins to kindergarten and do the laundry. He started doing the laundry around 10:30 a.m., but when his brother came home from school at around 2 p.m., he still wasn't finished. I don't blame him though. Have you ever done laundry for 9 people? It's pretty tough. He was struggling a lot. I told him everything he needed to know, but I guess he wasn't listening. For dinner, he made fried chicken, potato salad, and soup. But the chicken was only half cooked and the potatoes were still hard. I couldn't let my family get food poisoning, so I stepped in, microwaved the chicken, and mashed the potatoes myself. He was so useless. All he could do was stand there in silence as I fixed his mistakes. The next morning, he made the same exact thing for breakfast. For dinner, he just got some frozen food from the grocery store and microwaved it. He said he was too busy doing other things in the house. Day 4. Finally, his mother and sister couldn't take it anymore. The house was a mess and his cooking was just terrible. His sister was trying to lose weight, but all he served for dinner was deep-fried frozen food. And her clothes were all wrinkled up because he didn't know how to dry them properly.
You should be grateful for your wife.
You said it was easy, didn't you? But you're useless. They couldn't say anything back to them. This was my moment to strike back. I went on and on about how hard it was being a housewife and taking care of everyone.
I'm so sorry. I'll never say those things again. I'm really sorry.
Wow, now, don't tell me you're giving up now. You still got 3 weeks left. Good luck, I replied. He was about to lose his mind. It was actually pretty funny to watch. But he made a deal, so there's no backing out now. He kept apologizing to me after that, but I made him keep his end of the deal. Seeing all this, his father had to change of heart too. On weekends, he started helping around the house. On the last day, they came and apologized to me. Everyone else told me how grateful they were for everything I did for them. I was really happy to hear that, and so, things finally went back to normal. I was back to being a full-time housewife. But the thing is, even during the 15-day period, I still had to keep a close eye on my husband when he cooked. I couldn't let my kids eat raw meat after all. Plus, I helped him clean too. He always missed a spot or two. And sometimes, I went to pick up the kids myself because they were just too slow with their housework. Anyways, they realized that being a housewife wasn't easy. That's more than enough for me. Today, they help me out whenever they get a chance. and the kids really enjoyed having their dad around the house too. I actually enjoy living here with my husband's family, and I work really hard to keep the house nice and clean, so I just couldn't let my husband get away with what he said. I was pretty angry at first, but now I'm happy that they realized their mistakes. Plus, his mom and sister helped me out a lot too. I couldn't have done this without their help, that's for sure. My mother-in-law has always been good to me, and the same goes for my husband's brother and sister. And after this incident, my husband and his father started helping around the house too, so I guess everything worked out.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.